And hello, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives. And this morning, here from Mystery Island Studio, and reaching out to the west part of our. Let's see, I think you're in Mexico, isn't that right, Herboria?
Yes, I'm deep in narco territory.
That's what I understand. Let's talk about that a little bit. Anyway, first of all, welcome everyone. And we are broadcasting this morning on McDuff Lives 2 on YouTube. We are also asking everyone, please, to sign up for our Rumble channel. It's called McDuff Lives, and it's all one word, McDuff Lives. We have 325 people there now, and my goal is to get to 1,000. And the reward is going to be I get to cast loose off of YouTube. I really am just so anxious to get to the point where I feel confident that I can get rid of YouTube because it just is a drain on my productivity. It's something that always sending me nasty grams in the email, and I just don't want to hear from them anymore. I'm done. But for now, if you're watching me on YouTube, you're very, very welcome, and I'll be here until at least I get to 1,000 on Rumble. So anyway, enough said on that. I just want to make that little personal announcement because I have been struggling, folks, with YouTube for 4 or 5 years now, and it's just too much. So there you go. Wow. Sorry about the rant. Hervoye, welcome. Great to have you back.
Yeah, it's always great to be here, and I totally understand your feeling. I call it Pentagon Tube because it's basically run by the military industrial complex. They're one and the same Silicon Valley surveillance valley, and it's a love and hate relationship. It's I would love to not have it, but I still have it, and you kind of need it because it's getting more it's getting so difficult to broadcast our voices. More and more it's like we're voices in the wilderness. I don't know what's going on. I just feel like there's this dark shadow on the internet that's uh preventing us, it's limiting our reach across the board. So yeah, it's a struggle.
Absolutely, it's a struggle. But as far as our show is concerned here, please speak freely because I can ditch the YouTube copy of this show right after it's over, and I'd be sorry to do that, but I'm not going to stifle our voices just because of the incredibly offensive totalitarian quote unquote rules that they have over there, in which they just abuse the English language right and left, won't let anybody argue with what their position is. And I agree with you. Pentagon tube sounds right, but I also have to say who tube, you know, because the problems that I've had have always had to do either with the pandemic or the plandemic, or with saying the name and associating the name of a certain deceased prince from the royal family of King Charles. In other words, the paternal hand of the dead man's switch that turned on the horrible things that have happened. I'm talking about the prince whose name I cannot mention because every time I do, YouTube just shoots me down. But hey, I can say it now. I'm on Rumble. So I'm talking about Prince Philip, guys. Prince Philip, the guy that seems to be running or was running the show, and the guy that wanted to come back as a deadly virus to take care of our overpopulation problem. Well, he's dead, so and we've got a deadly virus. So I'm like saying, well, why don't
Maybe
people put two and two together and say, yeah, it's them, it's the royals. All right, so now I've stuck my neck out. What do you think?
maybe he's going to be the next pandemic. They'll call it, uh, COVID P or something. But my biggest problem with Pentagon Tube has been surrounding the 2020 thing where you go and vote, and they lie. They came out recently, YouTube and a blog saying, "Okay, just kidding. We're not going to take down any more videos if you question the 2020, vote thing." And I wanted to test it. I had at least two interviews I did with Vietnam veteran. How is this for patriotism? Bob Moriarty, Vietnam veteran who flew 800 sorties in Nam, risked his life. He questioned, the voting thing in 2020. And Doug Casey, the international man, they both had their interviews taken down on my channel. So I said, hey, I'm going to appeal because YouTube just said they're not going to, terminate. I appealed and I get the email from YouTube. Sorry, we're not going to reinstate your videos because they, blah, blah, blah. We have issues with the guidelines. Right. But you guys just said, no, doesn't matter. So
Yeah, yeah, that's it. It's a brick wall, and you can't talk to it. It doesn't respond. Um, well, the last time we got together, it was kind of a getting to know you for my benefit because I am absolutely fascinated with your incredible history and your expertise in geopolitics. And I thought I'd just pick up from there and ask you a general question. Is you have obviously geopolitics and empire is your blog. Tell us about why you decided to start it and what your goal is. What are you trying to accomplish with this blog?
yeah, I think last time we spoke, I was in back home in Chicago. So now I'm here in Mexico, and yeah, I mean, it's basically it's really to observe. It for me. It's been a vehicle to allow me, like a tool, a vehicle to allow me to just analyze and observe the world. There are some of my listeners who they're looking for solutions. I'm not really, my solutions are more spiritual as a Christian, but I'm not. Sometimes people get a bit demanding and want to focus on solutions. I'm just principally here just kind of figure out what's going on. You see the book behind me. That's that renowned Swiss historian Daniele Ganser
Uh,
of the Gladio fame. He
yeah.
discussed the NATO secret armies, how NATO carried out false flag operations and state terrorism. Our European liberal democracies murdering their own citizens and prime ministers and children and women. Um, and I just interviewed him yesterday. A
Oh
rare
wow, I've got to see that.
a rare English language interview with Daniele because he does everything in German. That's his market, and so I'll post that tomorrow.
Now,
Hopefully,
is that his new book that's behind you?
yes, it's his because he does mostly everything in German. That's his market, and
Okay.
he really doesn't focus on anything else anymore. Which is good for him. He's so popular. He's selling out conference after conference over. In Germany and German speaking Switzerland, he told me 100 million people population, and that was just published. It's his German book, but it was just translated by Skyhorse, which publishes the books, for Robert Kennedy and other folks like that. And so
Hmm.
Skyhorse just published it in January, so some 5 months ago, and it's called USA: The Ruthless Empire. And so, I interviewed him, 5+ years ago. I Skyped him into my classroom at the Tec de Monterrey where I used to teach. So basically, at Geopolitics Empire, I'm just for me, I think I mentioned this before. My obsession is world government because I feel like that's the goal, the end game, and that's a synonym for empire. Empire, imperialism. I think world government is the ultimate form of empire. That's what any empire has striven for, right? A world empire, and geopolitics is just like the science of how to get there, right? Demographic, all the different factors, ingredients, right? That help you kind of figure out what's going on: demographics, economics, technology, science, war, military, deep politics, the weather now, geoengineering, all of these different things that are going on.
So many things and so many things we could talk about. Once again, I appreciate your making time for us because the breadth of your experience and you're a young man is really astonishing. So great. And let's. You mentioned Robert F. Kennedy a minute ago, Jr., and he's been making an awful lot of news. Of course, there's a lot of spears being chucked at him at the same time. But he's the only one that's out there on the question of our public health issues. And well, I guess Dr. Shiva deserves credit for that, but I don't regard Dr. Shiva in the same uh, uh, running with somebody like Bobby Kennedy's experience and stature. So let's talk about Bobby a little bit, and particularly about what he's been trying to do in order to expose uh, the assassination of his uncle. One of the great heroes of my own show, my own life, John F. Kennedy. And my theory, my theme, my working rule is that this country was subjected to a coup d'état on November 22nd, 1963, and the people running the government since then have been these operatives of so-called deep state that are in fact doing the bidding towards what you are studying the most, and that is creating a one world government, a totalitarian system. Nevertheless, if you look at polls, if you look at well, God forbid, look at the mainstream media, you'll find that very few people are latching on to this, and that, of course, is frustrating for us. I'm sure it is for you. But give me some good news. Tell me, what do you think? Is Bobby going to be able to lead a charge towards uncovering CIA abuses of the past 100 years, or maybe I'm giving them too much credit? Let's say 68 or so years.
I mean, I think that's a good point that history, I got a whole series of books behind me. I became obsessed, and these are academic, high quality books. You've got Target Patton, how the government, the deep state, took out General Patton, Martin Luther King Jr.,
Yeah,
Dag Hammarskjöld, the
yeah,
UN Secretary General. I mean, they killed the Secretary General of the United Nations. They kill American generals. They kill civil rights leaders like MLK, Active State, the book there behind me. And then one of the best that everyone cites that I use in my course is James Douglas's JFK and the Unspeakable, which I have right there. And then Robert Kennedy's book. I actually got that one signed from Children's Health Defense. I guess I gave a donation or something. And then his latest one, Anthony Fauci. And everyone, even Daniela Ganser in his book that I just read, he talks about, as you just mentioned it, how it was a defining moment, the JFK assassination. Oliver Stone talks about this. Ron Paul, who I recently met, and he did that interview with Tim Pool. He said all these smart people say that was the phase transition, right? I mean, again, you're very familiar with that, with regarding your father's work and your book. That's when we officially went from into being taken over by this deep states. I'm not as confident that RFK Jr. will be able to win or get far. I mean, my general feeling, I feel like there's no political solution anymore. Um, so I'm not really emotionally investing in the election. But when you compare, I think, RFK to basically any other candidate, to me, everyone else looks like a clown, regardless of politics. John Bolton was on CNN yesterday talking about running. I mean, that guy's a clown. He's like, he literally looks like his face and his mustache, like he's a cartoon character. And, he just wants to hit that red button and blow up the world, start World War III. John Bolton, right? You listen to Nikki Haley. I mean, the level of her intellect and speech, not very high. Trump is, I think has good intentions, but again, he's also not very diplomatic. And then you look at RFK Jr. I mean, his foundation of knowledge, he can go on about deep state and deep CIA killing his uncle, and as you mentioned, the big pharma complex, anything, the Ukraine war. This guy can talk as a politician in the good old days. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like he's out of I would vote for RFK Jr. I would that's for me. He blows everyone else out of the water. He's a Kennedy, and he seems like he's ready to give his life for to fight the deep state, and I don't really see that from any other candidate.
His speeches are remarkable. He's the only one that can hold attention for an indefinite amount of time. It's like, wow. He gets better and better as his speeches go on. And despite the fact that he has a horrible speech impediment, uh, but he's, I think you can get used to it. I've gotten used to it, and the content of what he says is certainly astoundingly good. Somebody, I was reading about him yesterday. Somebody said that he adopted the Brahmin style of speech of his father, the Boston Brahmins, and I think that might be a little harsh, but at the same time, it is descriptive of a Kennedy speech of John F. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, all of them. I mean, they were all about bringing in the Greeks and the Romans and all the great philosophers, and it's all going to be packaged very, very nicely in an extremely cogent an interesting way. So I'm for him just because he can speak well, and I admire that, of course, very much. Okay, uh, let's see. How about Russia? Let's conquer Russia for a minute. And I know it takes a little longer than a minute, as Mr. Zelensky's finding out, but eh, Putin and the West. Uh, I've had a number of conversations with our mutual friend Riley Wagaman about this, and I'm still hoping that Putin is a good guy, but as long as he's allowing the WHO and the WEF policies and everything else to go on in Russia, I'm afraid that this war might be an orchestrated war on both ends, and that they're both sides are are being puppets pulled by strings and told when to go to war and when not, because for greater geopolitical reasons, somebody, the deep state, I guess, has decided they really want to have a destructive war in that area. So that's my opinion. What's yours?
I still, well, just before continuing on that note, just speaking of war, there's been a lot of interesting news that I've been following. Primarily my Telegram feed, Geopolitics and Empire, 12,000 plus subscribers there, and my Twitter as well. That's my curated feed where that's what I'm looking at mostly in terms of news, and just in the war front is being reported that Israel is preparing for war with Iran. Like, seriously, this time they've created a new intelligence division to create war plans for what they call what no one imagined would come, the first Israeli Iranian war. And then that was reported in the Israeli papers. And then in Taiwan, it's been reported that U.S. is preparing to evacuate Taiwanese for the first time. And I may have mentioned before, I was in April in LA at the American Freedom Alliance Conference, World War III, the early years, and a lot of smart people there, General Brigadier Robert Spalding. And that's exactly what he said. He said that we can't do anything about Taiwan. We can't defend it. The only thing we can do is evacuate. And now we're hearing news that the U.S. is preparing to evacuate Taiwanese. But getting then back to Russia, I think there's a nuance. It doesn't have to be like one or the other. There's a lot of people. I think people in general think in too much in binaries,
Yeah.
which is stop that. Left, right, Republican, Democrat. Uh, you know, anti-Russia, pro-Russia, or I think in geopolitics, deep politics, it's very nuanced, complicated, and complex. There's a lot of moving parts and factions, and it's shifting constantly, right? Just take JFK for example. He came in, and while he was I'm sure he wasn't expect. He was not, he got on that ride, and he had no idea what to expect. And then that you got the Dulles brothers who want to push him towards interventions and false flags, and then he does a 180, right? So that's an example of that, you know, gray zone that we find ourselves in. And so with Russia, it's like I think there will be a war, as you allude to. Um, that there are genuine uh, hostilities between the West and the East. Nationalist, geopolitical, but at the same time, as you mentioned, the globalists are already there. They're in every single country, and they've got momentum. They've built these institutions, and it would really take something for a president. If Putin came out and said we're doing away with our membership at the WHO or UN, that's a really radical measure. I mean, and then for him to do something like that, I think he couldn't do it alone. You know what I'm saying? If he came out and said, I'm just going to decree, he still needs to have some support from Russian, his administration. He can't just one man and say I'm doing away with it. And so it's like a complicated situation, and I don't see them, frankly, doing that. So you're on that globalist ship. Meanwhile, you're fighting elements of this globalism. So it's a complicated situation, and I think it's kind of beyond Putin and people like that at this point. And just what I'm reading every day, I told you that one of my biggest obsessions is world government and the digital technocracy, which I feel is the expression of that world government. I'm reading in Kenya, they're deploying nationwide now in Kenya this biometric vaccine stuff. So every kid that's going to be born, they're going to take all the DNA biometrics of them and their parents, and then be able to track until at least 5 years old, so they don't miss any vaccine injection. So and then every country on biometric updates. Like I'm reading every day, Kuwait and Papua New Guinea and Philippines, and every country is rolling out digital ID and access control. Like when you enter the country, total biometric like access controls, and so every country is doing that. So yeah, it's a complicated situation. So it's I think it's a bit of both. Putin is struggling to at least keep away some elements of globalism, like AMLO here in Mexico. Maybe the LGBT stuff and things like that.
Taiwan, of course, is been in the crosshairs for a while now, and it's starting to look like they're really beating the war drums, as you've pointed out. Um, my study of that Taiwan area is often connected to my father because of General MacArthur, and because of the obvious difference between the MacArthur and American support of Chiang, the nationalists of the Republic of China, and what became during World War II the emerging support of communist China secretly by the British. And the British, of course, have been allied with the Wall Street bankers, and the City of London banking interests are going to have an interest in something as lucrative as opium. And they always have, and they always have hidden and been able through pomp and circumstance and to hide behind the the nobility of said nation, um, but to use that as a geopolitical tool as well as just a way to get wealthy has been going on for a long time. I'm talking about opium, of course, and its subsequent uh, heroin and now fentanyl. That the remnants of the Kuomintang army ended up, of course, as you know, in Taiwan and setting up a government there in 1946, I think it was, and supported by the United States ever since then. But the dope dealing that was going on with Chiang's army, centered in Shanghai and Hong Kong and other places, uh, was very, very um, lucrative, of course. And now we have this Taiwan government, which has always been, in my mind, a successor to that opium economy that was sustaining the nationalists for decades. Um, my suspicion is that the people in the United States that are saying we want to go to war with China are really just looking at the last vestiges of the Chiang Kai-shek opium regime and thinking we're going to take it over. That's not, we're not going to allow that to exist anymore. They're competing with us, and we don't allow that. I'm going to take Taiwan and just completely destroy the competition. Uh, and I think that it is still is some competition going on for the opium market coming out of Asia and heading toward the West Coast, and of course, as we've always, uh, as my studies indicate, through Mexico as a convenient means of entry. So those are my comments on Taiwan. I'm afraid that Taiwan was never really a legitimate nation in the first place, and that I think that the people that lived there before Chiang came got pretty much decimated and turned into serfs in a drug empire type of country. So I don't know. I don't know whether we should support Taiwan or whether we should just kind of say, okay, China, you can have it. I mean, is it worth fighting for? Why are we going to fight for why are we going to go over there and uh, what it looks like just pull all of our money, all of our people, all of our resources out of it and just leave it there penniless, broke, uh, and ready for the next takeover.
Yeah, I kind of feel like, maybe some people will disagree. There's a lot of hawkish Americans, but I kind of feel like it's a lost cause at this point. And for someone like myself, just being multi cultural, if you look at the history, I mean, it's the same Chinese people. It's just the circumstance, as you outlined, right? As a result, um, they had to flee to the island. I kind of do feel like, ethnically, culturally, they are the same. But whatever happens. Happens, and my study of history, like looking at Chiang Kai-shek, it was strange that America initially supported the Chinese national movement, and then they switched, and then they supported Mao. Like, this didn't have to happen, but as you mentioned, these globalist elites, these British elites, wanted to to bring about this communist system, and that makes me think again of Ganser's book, and some eye-opening stuff that he writes about related to what you're talking about. He starts at the very beginning of American Empire, like when Columbus comes and how they genocide the Native Americans and so on and so forth, and Smettler Butley and Dole Pineapple, Chiquita Banana, and how a lot of these wars are the motivations are the financiers, right? It's got nothing to do with just war, like just war theory, that I studied in Geneva. It's just taking territory and control and market share, like you're talking about, if it's drugs or semiconductors or whatever. And in some of the statistics he was discussing, that some of these corporations, for example, whatever product it was, Dole, like fruits or whatever corporate product, that they were getting a return of like whatever 5-6%, and then that wasn't enough. And then when they started these different wars, or could regime changes, Vietnam, or in Latin America or the Middle East, that or during World War II, the profit that they got was up to even close to like 1,000%. So they went from like single digit percentage profits to 2, 3, 4, 500, 6, 7, 800% profits as a result of these wars. And then they consolidate the market. Just in, like, you can't even imagine the amount of wealth that these elites get from these wars. And so I think it's exactly to your point, touching on Taiwan or whatever, these the real deep state behind the scenes, just they profit like you can't imagine, but then they also consolidate their power as a result.
Yeah, it's like a battlefield only played out in people's entire lives. Their economy and the population are pawns on a chessboard, and they play with us. They really do, and they don't give a darn whether they kill us or don't kill us. It's just a matter of how do they make the money, and let it keep coming. And it's tempting to think, well, these are just a bunch of crazy greed heads, and who cares about them because they're all going to die anyway. But it's not it. They are part of a huge technocratic system that is being built with their help by drawing everybody into the same pipelines of where you get your goods from. Once if I can't live, off of the land, which nobody can anymore, then I'm going to be dependent upon some type of economy. And that's what they're doing, is taking over the economy of food, the economy of water, the economy, of course, of land, and you will own nothing and be happy is their mantra. But it's ridiculous. I am just hoping that people start waking up to this agenda, which is brought about through war. And also, I think they found another way, and that is through uh, uh, dishonest medicine, dishonest reporting of things as pandemics, which are not pandemics, scaring the hell out of people, using fear. And I think that's the biggest issue we have right now, is that our media is a complete whore to their interests, and all they want is fear, fear, fear. There's no way that we can see the potential that we have when we're completely bombarded by fear messages all the time. I, I don't know if you like Bob Marley's music or not, but one of the things that I really like is when he says, in this bright future, we cannot forget the past. And I think, wow, there's Bob Marley saying we have a bright future. He also says, have no fear of atomic energy, for they cannot stop the time. And those kind of messages feel good to me, like we're going to win. I might not be there to see it, but like Martin, maybe I get to go to the mountaintop and look into the land of milk and honey before I'm taken away. That would be enough for me. But sustaining that kind of hope, which they take away when they take away Martin, when they take away Bobby's father, when they take away President Kennedy, they take away that innate sense of hope and confidence that people have to have in order to keep our republic alive. Um, I love the idea of, let's get rid of all of this fear and hype and scariness and everything, and take an honest look at what we have accomplished. I mean, I love the internet. I don't think the internet's a bad thing. It may have been set up by bad people with evil motives. Okay. Maybe Elon Musk is a terrible person. Maybe he's up there creating a Starlink so that we'll all have our personal IDs and be followed around by satellites all day long. Maybe he is that evil, but at the same time, look at the technology that he's been able to produce. And whether it's really him, or whether it's the deep state feeding him, here, do this now, uh, feed this to them, they'll love it. um, you see what I'm saying is that, and it's part of what you're saying too about President Putin, is that we have to accept the fact that the future could be better than the past. The future could actually give us an opportunity for somebody to make a good decision. You speak of James Douglas's book, The Unspeakable, about John F. Kennedy, and that, of course, illustrates uh, the fact that Kennedy was he was in the right place at the right time to actually exert an influence on history in behalf of humanity, in behalf of that good future that we all hope for. And sure, he's gone now, but his spirit lives on. And I agree with you. My goodness, if we have a world now where doctors, quote unquote, are going out into African villages and jabbing kids with things that are going to affect their lives, and we're not stopping them. We're just we're letting all of this stuff happen. Then it's like we've been demoralized to the point where we don't care anymore, or even if we care, we don't get up out of that chair. We don't say anything. In other words, get up, stand up.
Yeah, and yeah, I just want to reiterate the point you mentioned about Putin. I think a lot of people are having absolutely cartoonish takes, whether it's the mainstream or the alt media that worships, uh, Putin and Russia, where it's never again this cartoonish. Um, it's not that it's very nuanced, and as things happen in the lives of these people, whether JFK or Putin or Mexican president AMLO or whoever, good or bad, I think moments sometimes come that make them make they question what's going on, and they might have an epiphany moment and do something that they weren't thinking, that they were going to do. That's the problem with the conspiracy minded world, that it's cartoonish. They think Putin is part of this globalist plot, and that's it. Nothing else can happen. He's destined. He might just wake up one day and screw it and say, "Go JFK." You know what I'm saying? So things are fluid and dynamic. And I thought I just mentioned earlier, you were talking about how I think food or the corporations. And it's insane. I was at the supermarket here in Mexico. It just more and more. It's like I can't buy anything anymore. It wasn't like this before. I'm looking at the ingredients of everything I want to buy, and now everything is saying, they switch tactics. Used to be genetically modified. Now they're using the term bioengineered, like
Mm.
that, like that's supposed to make me feel better.
Oh
And
boy.
just so many more things, everything's saying bioengineered ingredient, bioengineered. It's like I can't buy anything anymore. I just gotta, fruits, vegetables, and meat, nothing that's uh processed. And um what else? So yeah, it's like they're taking control of everything, monopolizing everything from food to media to government. And I think you mentioned media as well. I think one of the problems is it's the people's fault. We just need to. Why are we still listening to them? Why are we following their suggestions and dictates? Whether it's health stuff, every day here the state government, they make all these stupid suggestions, and it's the people. Stop. I don't have a television. I don't consume mainstream news or media. And that's again what Ganser talks about in his book. He's like, you need to read books. Stop consuming the daily news cycle. You don't even remember because it's so such. If you read a like a book, you're in it for a longer amount of time and it's structured longer, you can remember stuff. But the daily news cycle, you're not going to remember what you read yesterday or the day before. And so a lot of it is the people's fault. It's just stop paying attention to these freaks, media, government, globalists. Tune it all out and work towards you know the good. And so yeah, that was just those were some of the thoughts on my mind. Yeah.
That's one of the points that I think it's Aldous Huxley makes, and that is that the people will love the technology that is used to uh, to take away their ability to think. The technology that takes away our ability to think. That's what you just described. You watch the television, you get some information, quote unquote. It kind of hits you for a moment, but then the next thing it's a commercial, and then there's some other subject entirely, and then the next thing you know, you're involved in a drama, and you're watching some people, having domestic problems or something. But the just pulling your attention from one thing to another to another to another without allowing your mind. And again, there it is. It's like latchkey kids and everything else. It's like if they can get the mother out of the house, then they can control the kids by setting them in front of a television, or more modern version, setting them in front of an iPad. And I see it all the time. I'm sure you do too. That there's a kid there with an iPad in front of them instead of investigating the world around them. They're focusing into this machine that is in many ways designed to make them an idiot.
Yeah, and then yeah, it's exactly Huxley. And I try to every day, when I'm out, I try to gauge the populace. I'm trying to kind of read what's in people's heads. You know, I'm looking for patterns, always pattern recognition. Someone said, we're not conspiracy theorists. We recognize patterns, and what people wear, the cars they drive, the gadgets that they have, how they walk, what they're buying. Um, and I notice more and more, for example, very few people are using cash. I go to the supermarket here. I always got cash. Um, and I just made I rarely go to the supermarket because I hate going to the big box stores, but I'll go like once every few months and just I example, I went the other day, I spent $300. That's 6,000 pesos, which is a lot, in Mexican terms for grocery shopping. And every time I go, the cashier, they're always looking at me kind of like I'm crazy with this big wad of cash because they don't normally get that. Everyone's like paying with their cards, and then they're looking at the bills like, am I a narco, or these fake bills or something, And that just kind
Mhm.
of tells you where we're regarding the tech. The people are just getting used to the contactless digital stuff, and um, getting rid of the habit of the old world, the analog world, and they're all just happy with their little Apple phones, and here in Mexico, it's just Amazon, everyone's just constantly just Amazon bought nonstop. I mean, it's insane. People don't make their own food anymore. I can't understand. Once in a while, I'll order steaks. They grill a kilo of steak, or pizza delivery, right? Once in a while, but people they've got these apps now, and like the Uber Eats deliveries. It's not Uber Eats here. They've got like a Rappi and Didi, it's called, and people are ordering like breakfast on their app. So some guy delivers them their breakfast and then their lunch and then their dinner. For me, is the weirdest thing to order breakfast on an app uh constantly. And then you get used to, because that's the system that they want. They don't want us to make our own food. They want you to be dependent on their food delivery, and then you won't be autonomous. You're gonna then be like a little kid, and then if they, at some point, if you do a thought crime, they're like, sorry, we're not gonna deliver food to you today. You're gonna just starve to death in your home because you can't grow your own food. You can't make your own food. You've now become dependent on us, and it's insane. But same thing with technology that you say. I've got a Starlink right behind me. It's a like a Plan B internet, and um, yeah, this technology, it's still good. A lot of the technology, it's a double edged sword. A gun you can kill someone with, you can hunt, you can defend yourself. The internet, and we can get the message out. They can use it to control us. It's always been like that in history.
But this has been a turning point. This whole pandemic season has been a turning point, and we notice it in the statistics, the death statistics, and also the decrease in the life expectancy. I mean, life expectancy has been increasing for the entire 20th century up to now. And now we find that instead of looking at an average of 75 or so years, we're looking at 72 or 71. And it seems to be trending downward. And this is happening, of course, at the same time, by coincidence, of course, with the pandemic. And that, of course, gets me back to the question of, yeah, we do have a problem. We do have a big problem with this deep state behind the scenes that can manipulate the entire world through fear. Through just they learned how to do it. They know that if they push the right button, we'll do what they want us to do. And we've covered already the fact that we've just been allowed ourselves to become dependent upon a big system. I used to talk about local food. I used to think, what we ought to designate a geographic area. Everybody ought to have their own geographic area in which that area is self-sufficient in food and clean water. And, if that's a county or a city or a little town, or maybe it's just a few hundred people, whatever it is, it's the basis of freedom. If you don't have the permanent ability to feed yourself without worrying about it, then you're not free. And this country, it is America. I mean, as you know, I mean, our grocery stores maybe have 3 or 4 days worth of stock in them. If the interstates are interfered with, or if the trucks can't roll for whatever reason, or the planes come down again, food is going to be a problem. And they're not afraid to use food as a weapon, and to put us into that. Uh, so once again, trying to do things that make common sense, regular old smart things, like don't rely upon the government for your food. It's just being brainwashed out of us, along with our critical thinking skills, and we have to fight back. And I know you're fighting back. Mexico, man, I saw yesterday, and you might have seen it. It's kind of a viral thing that I saw on Twitter. It's a man standing on this gorgeous beach in Mexico, and the waves are flashing in, and the sky is blue. And he's talking to the camera, and he says, we don't have forest fires. Mexico has the most forests in the whole world per capita, but we don't have forest fires. Up in Canada, you all are having these forest fires, and all in America, the smoke is hitting you and all that stuff. Come down here. We don't have any of that. Why? Because we are governed by the narco lords. We don't have the problem of being governed by the governments. Our narco government is taking care of us, and we have this beautiful beach and clean air, and so we love our narco lords. I don't know if you saw it or not, but how close is that to reality?
Yeah, I found that guy just the other day and followed him on Twitter, and I retweeted that video. His name is
Okay.
Jekov Kanani. He says human rights activist, the public speaker, coach. Everyone's a coach today, but I can't fully agree with him. I just retweeted one of his things this morning before we joined. He's amusing. He makes you think, and he's got some good points. Like he was just at one of these little local corner shops, and he shows you what you can buy in Mexico for $16. 4 big water bottles, 2 bottles of orange juice, 30 eggs, 12 dozen bananas for $16. Like it's very cheap, and he does have a point about I think the fires were a false flag. Everything's a false flag. Basically, again, you read Daniela Gansers. He goes throughout the whole history of the American Empire. It's all one false flag after another. I mean, people are so stupid and naive, and it just works. And so he does have a point that the Canadian fires, it's through arson to bring about this climate change dictatorship, and it's not the case in Mexico. But nevertheless, that stuff is going on behind the scenes in Mexico with the digital technocracy that's developing. And he does have a point that it's less worse under the narcos, but um, it's there are still issues. Recently here where I am, a couple weeks ago, a month ago, they found 7 young people like in their 20s. Uh, they were working at a call center. Uh, Apparently, it was an illegal call center, like not a legal call center, probably run by criminals organizations or the cartels. And the call center was all about fraud and extortion, or I think one of the things they're trying to scam old elderly Americans, trying to sell them property that doesn't exist or something. Just illicit activity. And these 7 young people were killed, disappeared. And they found like 45 bags of their remains. They chop them up, which is insane. And that's still the sort of stuff that goes on. So it's not really as simple as this guy says it is. But yeah, and I don't think we're out of the reach of the globalists either. They are. We've got the foreign minister Ebrard, who's running for president now. He was very kind of pro WHO, and what if this guy becomes president? They're just gonna. I think they're building vaccine factories in Mexico as well, like to produce the COVID vaccines or whatever. So you can't escape the globalism. But again, this guy does have a point. It's a less worse because the government is not as good functioning, um, and you have that element of between the narcos and the state, that tension that creates the problem there that you might not have in a country like Europe, where it's safer but easier for the globalists to run over you. Here, it's slightly less more difficult for them to do so.
You're telling me about the grocery store trip. It's kind of makes me sad because I think of Mexico as a place where the food is just abundant and everywhere, and it's such a great place to grow. At least I don't know the different regions, but in my mind, it's like a cornucopia of great food, vegetables, organic, everything. Why shouldn't everything be organic in a climate like that? That can just, I mean, it couldn't be any work, to grow. But no, they won't let it happen. The natural corn, they want to replace it with GMO corn. Everything has got to be GMO, and uh, the idea of living off of nature. Uh, they're trying to even make us forget that it's possible, and we've got to get back somehow to do it. Some of my friends in Ireland talk about rewilding the forests, and why not? The reason everything is so scarce and expensive is that we are no longer connected to nature as an economy. The economy has been lifted out of the the natural environment and put into an artificial environment where everything is handled on computers and digitally, and that controls us. But it's almost like the emperor's new clothes. That's the story about no, the emperor doesn't really have any clothes on. They don't really have control of us unless we let them have control of us. And somehow they've created a psychological state in which we are willing to let them have control of us. Uh, at least we recognize it, and by seeing it, hopefully we can wake people up. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, on the food, I mean, don't get me wrong, still it's better than other places here in Mexico in terms of if you want to grow your own food, or you can go to the farmer, the market here, and buy, just produce, locally produced fruits and vegetables and meat. Like, all this talk about how they want to take away our meat. I still go to this. It's not a big. It's a local Mexican mini supermarket, and just you can notice you walk in, they got all pretty much not processed foods, fruits, vegetables, dairy, and meat. What do you call it? The butcher shop, and they've got literally like more than a dozen guys working in the butcher shop. That just tells you, just the people here buy a lot of meat. It's all, just raw, fresh meat. And I mean, I just thought it was a bit exaggerated to see like more than a dozen people working in the butcher shop, like 10 to 15 people chopping up the meat. So you can still get that access, but again, it's a life and death struggle at every single point of our lives. Everything we've talked about, whether it's the media or the technological control, the banking system, the food, because now, NAFTA, that's the genesis of the North American Union, NAFTA, which is NAFTA 2.0 now called USMCA, and those are the rules for the corporations. Basically, that takes away national sovereignty, and the NAFTA rules have given the global, the corporations are basically, it's those are the globalists, the corporations, and they now have more sovereignty than the nations, and it's given them the rules. And so now Mexico's like, we don't want GMO corn, and now the corporations are opening a dispute. They're going to open a dispute again using the USMCA NAFTA rules. They're going to open a dispute now, U.S. versus Mexico, because they're angry. Mexico. This is a good sign that Mexico is putting up a fight and a struggle.
Mhm.
That saying we don't want GMO corn. Now the globalist American freaks are like, okay, we're going to start a dispute. But that's not good because they often win those disputes in NAFTA because the courts are in their uh, favor in the NAFTA tribunals and court cases. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But I think it goes back to what we're saying earlier. Just tune out, disassociate. Like I've got Mexican friends here. They're very like kind of um, hippie-ish, a bit new agey, but they just buy completely local food. They don't have television. Um, they don't do none of this stuff that the average folk does. And that's another thing. Like it can be hard because the crowd, the normal friends and neighbors, they're the people who drink the Coca-Cola and eat the GMO food and watch the Netflix. And it's like it's tough, but you got to seek out that other crowd. I have a hard time with the normies because they're just it's almost like they're lobotomized, and I don't and it's dangerous for me because I don't want to consume that stuff, or ideologically the stuff that they talk about. It's like I've got no interest in it. Like I don't find you know and so I seek out the so it's very, you have to have this agency, and it's more difficult, but every day, it's more difficult not to go to the Walmart and then get your food locally. um Natural health, again, my friends, they don't go to doctors, they're into the natural health as we are. And so yeah, it's a lot more work, but I think that's just how you got to do things.
All right. Well, I guess we're going to have to set a good example and to do the best we can for our friends and family and the people around us. Just to show that no, life does not depend upon YouTube. Life does not depend upon the daily
Walmart.
news or Walmart or any of that nonsense. And we've got to keep it that way. That we can't just be lethargic and say, I'm not going to worry about it, because doom is impending. And it is the doom that you spoke of at the top of the show, the totalitarian digital control system that, if we allow it, really can entrap us, really can entangle us for the rest of our lives and future generations. So it's very, very serious war, a war for people's minds. But again, what weapons do we have except for setting a good example, reading the right books, and sharing what we know? And thank you very much for participating here on McDuff Lives and sharing a lot of your very interesting perspectives this morning.
It's great always to join you. And I recently met Ron Paul, and I pinned on my Twitter my photo with him, and I found a quote where he said, setting a good example is a far better way to spread ideals than through force of arms. And I think he's a living example of that, just doing the right thing consistently for almost 90 years now, and then the impact you're going to have. And we didn't get to talk about it as much, but the UN just tweeted yesterday, they said mis and disinformation and hate speech are threatening progress on the global goals. In a new report, Antonio Gutierrez, the Secretary General, puts forward proposals for clear and coordinated global action to address the clear and present threat. So basically, they're saying true information and free speech are threatening our progress on the totalitarian world government. So we're making proposals for coordinated global action to address this threat to, of truth seekers like us, this threat obstacle to our world government. It's absolutely insane. But anyways, John, keep up the great work, and I look forward to coming on again.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll have you back soon. And let's just keep those blue helmets away. Thanks, everyone.